At the Sunday Service Committee meeting in April, Peter informed us that there was no speaker scheduled for Mother's Day. I suggested that we invite some of our congregation to participate, as we had done for the International Women's Day service. I offered to coordinate and be one of the speakers. I'm grateful to both Jan and Kai who agreed to be part of today's service. To begin, I want to acknowledge those of you who are not mothers. However, all of us have had mothers, birth, adoptive, or foster, and today is the day when we pay homage to them. I first became aware of motherhood and its implications when at the age of 19, I became pregnant. At the time, I was serving in the Women's Royal Naval Service in England. When I told my parents, the reception I got was icy. My mother's words were, "What will the neighbors say?" Despite the fact that the young man I was dating wanted to get married, my parents considered him to be unsuitable as he came from a working class background. For reasons that I cannot understand, I agreed with their suggestion that I should have an abortion. Several years later, I came to Canada where I met Mitch and we started living together. Once again, I discovered I was pregnant. There was a complication as Mitch was married, although he and his wife had been separated for over a year. We planned to marry as soon as he could get a divorce. I flew back to England to tell my parents. At this time, they informed me that my father had been married before and had a daughter, the first time I knew of this. When we told Mitch's parents, they were very supportive and welcomed me into their family. Sadly, I miscarried in the 5th month and was put in a ward full of women who were there for termination of their pregnancies, which was a very heart-wrenching experience for both of us. Our wedding date had already been set, Feb the 21st, 1976. We had wanted to be married on Valentine's Day, but of course, so did a lot of other people. The ceremony took place in the United Church in New Westminster, which was where we lived at that time, and this was our home church. We were married by the Reverend John Cashaw, who suggested that both my parents should escort me down the aisle, which made my mother very happy. A little over a year later, we were delighted to find out that I was once again expecting. By now, we had moved to Abbotsford and were living in the house which had belonged to my parents. They'd emigrated from England the previous year to be closer to me, but homesickness made them decide to return there after our wedding. This 3rd pregnancy was a time of uncertainty, as having had one miscarriage made us feel apprehensive. However, everything seemed to be going well, and once we reached the 6-month point, we felt more relaxed and confident. With a due date of January the 21st, we decided that we would celebrate Christmas by going to a dance. I must have done one too many polkas, because in the early hours of December the 30th, I woke with severe abdominal pain. "Mitch, I think I'm starting labor." We got in the car and went to the hospital, a short 10-minute drive. I was put in a wheelchair, and as the nurse was pushing me down the corridor, she looked back and said, "Oh my God." There was a trail of blood behind us. My memory becomes somewhat of a blur after that. My family doctor was on holiday, and the doctor on call arrived in motorcycle gear, which he was removing as he hurried into the room. The monitor on the baby was indicating distress with an irregular heartbeat. So he said, "An emergency C-section is needed." Mitch was hurried off to a waiting room while I was taken into the operating theater. Several hours later, Mitch was still waiting, becoming more concerned, until a nurse asked him why he was there. He explained the situation and she checked and said, "Oh, your wife is in recovery and you have a baby girl." It turned out that our restless baby had wrapped the umbilical cord around a leg and tugged until it had separated from the placenta, causing the blood loss. At last, a completed pregnancy and finally motherhood. We were disappointed that after all the hours of prenatal classes preparing us for the natural birth, that we never got to experience the delivery. However, we were relieved and grateful that the prompt action of the medical staff had resulted in the safe arrival of our first child. Although I was in a lot of pain from the surgery, I was able to breastfeed, and we quickly developed a close mother and baby bond. After several days, I was allowed to go home, and we could truly become a family of 3. Our next 2 children were both born by C-section, as I had been told that a normal delivery was not recommended due to possible weakness of the womb. However, I was able to have a spinal epidural and thus remain conscious throughout the procedure, and Mitch could be with me. It's very different when you know the day and time your child will be born. We wanted some element of surprise, so chose not to be told their sex following the ultrasounds. 40 plus years later, we are proud of our 3 offspring. The oldest has 3 children and is an elementary school teacher in Clearwater. She organizes the local hockey and soccer teams while her husband coaches. Our son lives in Smithers with his wife and 2 children, where he has his own business doing renovations and carpentry. As well, he is a volunteer firefighter. Currently, he is in Fort St. John, providing support to the BC Forest Service firefighters. Our youngest lives in New Zealand. She is married with no children. A couple of years ago, she decided on a major career change and is now in her 3rd year at college, where she is training to become a counselor. Early on September the 30th, 2001, Mitch dropped me off at the front door of the Ponderosa Lodge care home in Kamloops. We had received a phone call 15 minutes earlier that my mother was nearing the end of her life. Some days prior, she had fallen and broken her hip. A year previously, she had been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, and we had looked after her in our home for several months until it became too difficult due to her wandering. I got to her bedside where she appeared to be sleeping. I took her hand and whispered in her ear, "Mom, it's okay. You can let go now. Go and join Dad. He's waiting." Moments later, she took one last breath, and then there was silence. Soon afterwards, Mitch came in and I said, "I think she's gone, but she waited for me to say goodbye. Can you call the nurse?" Although I never had a very close relationship with my mother, I was thankful to have been with her in the last moments of her life. Thank you for listening to my experiences of both being a mother and of having a mother. And now I'll pass the baton over to Jan and Kai, who will tell their stories. Thank you.